Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Pam. This is Total Pamarchy. If you're new here, I make nerdy and pop culture inspired crafts every week. This week my plans were a little bit different and they got changed rather last minute, but that's okay. We like a challenge. As you're all aware of, this meme, I had one of my best friends suggested Sunday afternoon that I make the mitts. Bernie's original mitts were made by Jen Ellis and given to him when he was on the campaign trail and are made from recycled sweaters. I'll link her website down below so you can go check that out, because without her we wouldn't have this meme. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. These were not easy to make, so this video is going to be more of a how I made it rather than a how to make it. I feel like a tutorial for these mitts would be incredibly long, even though I feel like by the time I edit this down it will be a step-by-step, and if you really wanted to, you could follow along and make them for yourself. So on Sunday, after texting with my bestie, I sat down and tried to figure out the chart pattern for the top portion of the knit. So that's the main portion of the knit on the back side of his hand, where you can see all that lovely pattern and color work. I used this close-up photo as a reference, and I noticed a few other things about the mittens. There's a white thumb, a blue palm, and the cuff is not ribbed but looks similar to a garter stitch. So I worked out the chart as seen in this reenactment and color-coded it to prevent confusion. I edited out all those bits. This is what my chart ended up looking like once I was done with all my scribbles and everything. It was, I keep saying it's a challenge, but I have no better word to use other than like to curse this. I use an old Patton's Gloves and Mitts pattern book that used to be my grandmother's. If anyone has one of these lying around. It's just this plain mitts pattern in 3 sizes. Then I went into my yarn stash and grabbed all the brown I had, along with a blue and a white. The pattern uses 4 shades of brown. I didn't know what gauge my yarn was, so I just kind of guessed. Okay, so let's get to the pattern and the knitting and all that fun stuff. So this pattern is knit on straight needles. I experimented with needle sizes for the cuff and ended up choosing a US 5 3.5 millimeter needle for that. I started with the right knit. So to begin, I cast on 40 stitches and then knit and garter stitch for 26 rows, which is about 2.5 inches. And that's the easy part. Mitts are not difficult, and I've probably used this pattern before. I found some old mitts that I had knit in the past, and I think these are actually ones, this is just a variegated yarn that I made when I was younger, and it's probably with the same pattern except it just has a ribbed cuff there. So if you did want to make mitts and would like just a straight mitt knitting tutorial, I'd be happy to do that, especially with the same pattern that I used to make the Bernie mitts, but just with one solid color. So if you like something like that, just leave a comment down below and I'll think about doing that for you. Once I was done with the cuff, I joined a medium shade of brown that I had and switched to larger needles. I used a US size 7 4.5 millimeter needles. So at this point I started the pattern. The chart is only used for the top of the mitt and is 21 stitches wide. The remainder of the mitt is knit and stockinette stitch. I joined the medium shade of brown, and for 6 rows I knit 1 row and purled 1 row. I took some creative liberty for my mitts. On Bernie's knit, when you look at the picture, the white of his thumb goes all the way down to the cuff. And I believe when I saw another picture later on, like he was holding up his hand, which I didn't see beforehand, it looks like the white may go across the bottom of the palm as well. And had I known that, I may have done white here instead of the brown. So I started with white at the thumb gusset to keep it easier for me when I was knitting. So I knit 1 row, purled 1 row for 6 rows, Then I had 2 more rows until the thumb gusset began. The next 2 rows I joined in white and worked in the chart pattern for 21 stitches, and then knit the remainder of the row in the medium brown. I don't know if you can see this. It's really hard to kind of see it in this form because it's already finished, but there's the cuff, and then there's 6 rows of stockinette stitches just in this brown shade, and then I did 2 rows worked in the pattern where the white gets added in before the thumb gusset starts. So I worked in the pattern 2 rows and continued with brown around this side, and then the thumb gusset starts. And I just happened to be, because I was working with the white in the pattern already, when I joined the white for the thumb gusset, I had already had the white joined to the mitt, so it actually worked out really well. It was like a happy little accident. Working in multiple strands of yarn can be finicky, and if you do attempt this, just remember to go slow and take your time. I ended up placing a marker to remind me where the chart pattern starts and ends. You work in the chart on both the knit and purl sides. When working in the chart, you're gonna knit across one of these rows and then purl back across this way. So knitting and then purling, knitting and purling. It doesn't matter so much which way you're following it, if your chart was symmetrical, like this one mostly is, but if your chart was different, then you'd want to make sure you're going the correct way as you're following it. So to start the thumb gusset, I knit 21 stitches of the chart pattern. The gusset is the bottom part of the thumb before the thumb actually starts. It is made by increasing 1 stitch in the next 2 stitches. So that's, at this point, I joined the white for the thumb, and it worked out really well since I had used that for the chart pattern. Gotta love happy little accidents. Happy little accidents. There was quite a few happy little accidents on this until I got to the shaping the top of the mitt, and that was like something from hell, but we'll get there. And then I joined the blue for the palm of the mitt. I had originally picked a blue that I tried out, and I decided I didn't like it once I had knitted across the row, so I went and chose a different blue that I had backed out all of those stitches, joined the new blue, and re-knit across the row. And it ended up looking a lot nicer. It's a little bit darker shade. The other one was too bright and just looked it didn't look as good with the brown. Then I continued to increase the thumb gusset by working 21 stitches of the chart pattern, then increasing 1 stitch, knitting 2, and then increasing 1 stitch in the next stitch, then knitting the remainder of the row. Basically, the thumb gusset is worked by increasing 1 stitch, knitting to the last stitch of the thumb gusset. It's easy to see on these mitts because the thumb gusset stitches are all in white, and then you increase 1 more stitch and keep doing this until you have 52 stitches on your needles. You started with 40, so then you're going to end with 52. It took about 12 rows to do the thumb gusset. And then join in other colors as needed and working in the pattern as you go across and working up this portion of the pattern and those 21 stitches until you get to here where you're going to do the thumb. For the thumb, I knit 21 stitches of the chart and knit across the gusset. I ended up putting the remainder of the stitches on a holder at this point. You don't have to. In fact, the pattern didn't even tell you to do it. In fact, it's probably easier not to transfer them onto stitch holders. And I did that for the left mitt and wish I did it for the right. So when you stitch to the end of the gusset, I turned the work, cast on 1 stitch, purled to the end of the row, turned it again, increased and cast on 1 stitch, so turn the work, cast on 1 stitch, purl to the end of the row, including that cast on stitch, turn the work again, cast on another stitch, then work these stitches in stockinette stitch until the thumb measured 2 1/4 inches. Then I knit 2 together across, cut the yarn leaving a long tail, thread the yarn through the remaining stitches, and pulled to create the top of the thumb. I used the long thread to stitch up the thumb. not really the greatest at seams, and I think I need to improve that area. I'm sure other people are better at it than I am. But you know, we all have things we need to work on. That's one of mine, sewing. So once the thumb's finished, it's the remainder of the mitt that needs to be knit. Picked up 2 stitches at the base of the thumb and knit them. I decided at this point to expand the pattern and stitch over 2 with brown instead of blue, because at this point in time it was easier to continue with the brown for the right mitt. For the left I had to do something a little bit different, but I'll show you that later. Then I knit the remainder of the row I started when I knit across to begin the thumb. So basically it was like, this is my left mitt. Where's the right mitt? I'm demonstrating on the wrong one. So you knit that row across, knit up your thumb, sew that up, join 2 stitches here, and then continue that row along on the back that you didn't finish when you first knit along the front. It's hard to see in the video, but when I join the blue, I wrap it around the brown to prevent a big gap and creating 2 separate halves. So every time I would come to this middle portion, I would end up wrapping the one strand around the other strand so that these weren't separate pieces and they're joined by just doing that little wrap up there. And you want to do that anytime you might create a hole when joining a different color. Then I continued in the pattern until the mitt measured 5.5 inches from the top of the garter stitch cup. I was careful to add 2 more rows to my pattern, which I had already made up by happy accident. My chart was 25 stitches wide when I first made it, and I used the middle 21 stitches. So I had an extra 2 columns on either side to add onto the pattern for after the thumb for the right and left mitt. So it kind of worked out really well, and I did not plan that at all. It was a happy accident. I was happy it happened. When I finished that part and the mitt is the correct length and looks like this, then it's time to start decreasing. I'm not even lying, it was hard. Maybe I'm just being dramatic, but I found it really challenging. This was the point where I decided this video wasn't going to be a tutorial video, but more of a how I did it rather than a how to make it, because it's just overly complex. Tedious, it's really tedious. Look at the chart at this point. All of my previous happy accidents resulted in chart hell. Anyway, the decreasing isn't difficult. It was working in the chart pattern as I decreased that was. So you decrease by knitting 1, slipping 1, knitting 1, passing the slip stitch over, then knitting 14 for the first decrease row, knit 2 together, knit 2, slip 1, knit 1, pass slip stitch over, knit to the last 3 stitches, then knit 2 together and knit 1, and you purl all alternating rows. So you do the same decrease row, but decrease the stitches knit in between the decreases by 2 every time. So the first time that was knit 14, and then the next decrease. So the next time you decrease, it'll be knit 12, and then knit 10, then 8, 6, 4, etc. And then you continue decreasing until you only have 16 stitches left on the needle. Not gonna lie, this was a pain in the ass. I recorded it as if I could possibly explain this part, but basically you just follow the chart patterns as best you can and decrease as you go along. When I had 16 stitches left, which takes about 15 rows, you bind off purlwise. Then I was almost done 1 mitt. Yay! Now to deal with that inside mess. So I darned in all the ends. I didn't sew the seam at this point until I finished the left mitt. I also stitched up a minor hole around the thumb that occurred because of the picked up stitches at the base of the thumb and because I didn't seam down long enough, or at least that's what I feel happened. I had a little bit of a hole there and I just stitched it up a little nicer. Now on to the left mitt. Oh boy! So the left mitt's almost exactly like the right, but obviously the thumb's on the opposite side and the pattern is worked after the knit palm stitches. So Cast on 40 stitches again using the smaller needles. Knit and garter stitch for 26 rows or until it measures 2.5 inches. Start the pattern by knitting 19 and then 26 stitches of the pattern. I once again placed a marker so I knew when to begin the chart pattern. For the left one, I didn't join the blue until I began increasing for the gusset, and I did so on the purl row. And you increase for the gusset just as you did for the right mitt by increasing 1 in the first and then knitting over, increasing 1 in the left. Once the gusset is complete, it's time to make the thumb and knit to the end of the gusset increase, turn, cast on 1, purl to the end of the gusset, turn, cast on another one, and continue in stockinette stitch until it measures 2¼ inches. This time I left the stitches on the needles and it worked out fine. It was easier because I didn't have to put the stitches on holders and then have them in the way as I was knitting. Once the thumb is done, you continue to knit the mitt on the left. I picked up 2 stitches at the base of the thumb and I knit them with white this time instead of the brown. Then continue the pattern. On the purl row coming back, I expanded the pattern over with the brown over those extra 2 stitches so it looked the same as the right mitt. Then I added 2 stitches to the right side of the pattern for those added stitches at the base of the thumb. So on the left one, whoops, this is not the left one, this is the left one. You start here and you work around and then go this way. And I am losing my voice. For the right mitt, I added 2 stitches on this side and worked up, and for the left one was 2 stitches on this side and worked up. Then I continued knitting in the pattern until, is that my voice? I continued knitting in the pattern until it measured 5½ inches from the end of the cuff. Then I shaped the top as with the right mitt. This time was easier because I knew what to expect, but it was still a pain in the ass, I'm not gonna lie. And lastly, cast off purlwise. Then I darned in the ends of the left mitt. So I wanted the mitts to be soft for my friend, and because of the color change inside, it was a little bit mess of the yarn, so I felt like a backing was needed. I grabbed some fleece mitts I had lying around that I never wear and tested the fit. I decided to sew the seams of the mitt and stuff the fleece mitts inside rather than my original intention was perhaps like pulling the fleece mitts apart and then sewing them inside the mitts, which I suppose you could do. Or if you had some extra fleece lying around that you could cut out the mitt shape and then sew them on the inside. I just decided it would be easier to seam up the mitts and stuff the fleece inside, because ain't nobody got time for that. This way the liners could also be removed if you needed to wash the mitts. I turned the mitts inside out and sewed up the seams using the medium brown shade. And then my birdie mitts are finally done. Cue B-roll. So some final thoughts on the Bernie mitts. Would I make these again? Maybe, but only because these are for my friend and they turned out really freaking awesome and now I kind of want a pair. They turned out so much better than I actually thought they would. Honestly, half of this was probably like a happy little accident going along. You never know how something you're gonna make is gonna turn out when you're creating the design or following something, or basically when you've never done it before. You don't know how it's gonna go, and they turned out really nice. I'm quite happy with how they turned out. In fact, I absolutely love them, so I hope you do too. If you're going to attempt to make these for yourself, make sure that you're comfortable with color work, so changing colors while you're knitting and also increasing and decreasing. If you want to learn how to make just simple mitts that aren't something so complex, as I said, I'd be happy to perhaps maybe put up another tutorial just working in that pattern, and you can make other knits. It's just with worsted weight yarn. If you're going to make these, make sure you're comfortable with knitting. Last thought, Be like Bernie, donate to charity, and support Jen Ellis because without her, we wouldn't have this meme. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and these Bernie mitts and have been enjoying the Bernie meme as much as we have been up here in Canada. Consider subscribing to my channel for more weekly crafts that are nerdy and pop culture inspired. And remember to be kind to one another because when the world ends, that's all we got. Bye!